Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Friday, August 21st, 2020. And since we just wrapped up the DNC, I'm deciding to take a break from the 2020 election for this video. Today we're going to talk about the 2024 election, so we're going to jump 4 years ahead and talk about a potential matchup between Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence. So the reason why I think this would be a pretty significant matchup is because these are both of the candidates running on the VP ticket. Pretty much Mike Pence is running with Donald Trump and Kamala Harris is running with Joe Biden. So it would make sense to pitch them up against each other in the 2024 election. So this is assuming that Kamala Harris is the incumbent vice president at this time, assuming Joe Biden defeats Donald Trump and Mike Pence goes on to run 4 years later to reclaim this position and run on a Trump-type platform. There are too many differences between Mike Pence and Donald Trump for me to draw the same type of electoral map that we would see with Donald Trump as a regular candidate. Mike Pence is weak in many areas that Donald Trump is not, and while Donald Trump didn't necessarily have too much experience in terms of governing in 2016, I don't think experience is the issue at this point. For Mike Pence, he's a vice president. He isn't exactly too liked by America, nor is he too favorable amongst the GOP. He has a high approval rating, sure, but if they were to vote for someone on the presidential ticket, Mike Pence comes up with around 30% of the vote in early polling data, which is granted, what Donald Trump got in the early primary, but Mike Pence is nowhere near in terms of campaigning. Kamala Harris, I would say, is better than Joe Biden in terms of campaigning. So let's take a look at this map. We're using a 2024 map, so if you look at your state and it has different electoral votes, that's likely why. Some states remain the same, some states decrease, and some states increase. We've seen states in the Rust Belt consistently decrease over the past couple of years or past couple census elections. Not census elections, just censuses that have reduced the number of electoral votes. Pennsylvania was 21 with Obama, 20 with Trump, and now 19 in the 2024 map. Texas went from 34 to 38 to 41. Florida went from 29 to 31. So a lot of these states are starting to see an increase in terms of population and electoral votes in the southern region of the United States, whereas northeastern states and pretty much anywhere above this entire region is losing electoral votes. Almost all of them. Montana, Oregon are some exceptions. So let's look at this electoral map. If this was actually the 2016 map, by the way, a lot of these states are going to remain the same and safe for the Democrats and the Republican Party. So again, this is only 4 years after the 2020 election. A lot of these states aren't going to change in terms of their characterization just because we are working with a very boring electorate. I mentioned that in a lot of my videos because it's true. People don't like to vote for different candidates. So let's characterize all of the states. We don't really need to focus on any of the toss-up areas, but this is typically the map that we work with when we're going through my 2020 election predictions. And it pretty much just characterizes all of the states that are considered to be safe for both parties. And it usually ends up 183 to 124. But as you can see, the Democrats have been reduced to 180, losing 3 electoral votes, which Al Gore can tell you could make or break an election. And the Republicans are reduced by 1 electoral vote in total. However, looking at the swing states, they hold a lot more weight. So if the Democrats were to win a state such as Texas, that holds 3 more electoral votes than normal. Florida, 2. North Carolina, 1 more. So with those 3 states and the safe states, that puts them at 268. Otherwise, would not have put them at 268. So looking at a lot of these swing states, if the Democrats do run up the numbers on this electoral map, they very well could see a larger electoral college victory than what they might see in 2020 or what they saw in 2012 or 2008. And that's because of population. The Republican Party has always benefited off the fact that they typically do well in swing states. Other than the Obama years, the Republican Party won states such as Iowa and Ohio and North Carolina and Georgia. Georgia last time went for a Democrat was Bill Clinton. So since the 90s, the Democrats have never won Georgia, which is now competitive. The Republican Party has been relying on Texas. In most elections, they've been relying on Florida. And, thinking about Texas, thinking about Georgia, thinking about Florida and North Carolina, Florida sure was a swing state, but the rest of these pretty much weren't. They've always been GOP strongholds. And, that's one of the main issues as to why the GOP is going to have such a difficult time winning in future elections. Because even if they do win the Rust Belt, which they're doing right now, what does that put them at? 191. The Democrats lead in Virginia, Colorado, New Mexico, Nevada, Florida, North Carolina, Texas, Minnesota, Maine, New Hampshire, puts them at 317. Even if they lose Texas, okay. Even if they lose New Hampshire, okay. The Democrats still win. And we're seeing, increased turnout for the Democrats or expected increased turnout for the Democrats in a lot of these Republican states or previously Republican states that likely could make these races super competitive Texas is a toss-up. Arizona is a toss-up. Georgia is a toss-up. And in a regular election, they absolutely would not be. They would be Republican states. But Joe Biden leads by 9% on the national average, so you can see how these states, which were Trump states by 9%, could very well narrow up to being only +2, +3. But let's go back to the main purpose of this video. Kamala Harris, she would do very well on the West Coast. I honestly don't think that Nevada, Colorado, New Mexico are going to waver from the Democratic Party anytime soon, nor will Virginia. The Virginia GOP is a perfect example of a political party fading into irrelevancy so quickly. The Virginia GOP went from being super competitive on every level down to absolutely nothing, not fielding a candidate in this Senate election, fielding a bad candidate in the previous one, practically losing almost all of the state legislator races, even in gerrymandered areas. The Republican Party in Virginia lost its grip on the suburban voters around Northern Virginia. Those voters that voted for Bush. Fairfax County voted for Bush despite voting for Hillary Clinton by a tremendous margin in 2016. So the Republican Party has lost its grip on the state of Virginia, and I honestly don't see it coming back. And the same is said for Colorado and New Mexico. I do think that Kamala Harris's regional advantage in Nevada will absolutely help. But looking at this overall, electoral map, these 4 states probably won't change too much in the near future in terms of political party, voting patterns. The Democratic Party has held a consistent hold on these 4 states, and I expect that to continue with a Kamala Harris-Mike Pence matchup. So as we look across this map, Mike Pence is just not a good campaigner. He speaks well at debates, but that's because he was going against Tim Kaine. You can't really compare that. Tim Kaine was a bad candidate, in my opinion. He was not a good VP pick. Honestly, don't know why Secretary Hillary Clinton chose him. Maybe it was for Virginia, but other than that, he didn't really offer much to the campaign. And he honestly, he took a Trump-style debate tactic against Mike Pence throughout the entirety of it. Interrupting him and coming off as not necessarily unhinged. I think that's too far, but just someone who wasn't exactly prepared for what was coming up against him with Mike Pence. And I honestly do think Mike Pence did very well that debate, but I don't think he will do well against Kamala Harris. You see, the reason why Donald Trump does so well on the presidential level, the reason why he won when Mitt Romney couldn't or John McCain couldn't, was because of the fact that he was able to appeal to these voters and have a direct contact to them through his campaign enthusiasm. Him speaking on the campaign trail really made a lot of these voters feel as if he cared for them. Mike Pence, you really can't say the same. Mike Pence has a really shady history as well. People are going to immediately slam him as soon as he considers dabbling in his name as the potential 2024 nominee. He's already being slammed right now in the White House. Just the VP position is someone who's, for whatever reason, very elusive. We rarely ever see Mike Pence speak. We rarely ever saw Joe Biden speak in the Obama White House. But Mike Pence, if he puts himself back in the spotlight, he's going to be in for a lot more trouble than the 2016 election campaign, because this race is always about Trump or Biden and Kamala Harris. But Mike Pence really hasn't entered into the fray. We absolutely could see his entire character be torn down if he potentially runs for president. And the thing is, he can't just talk his way out of it. Donald Trump can. You can throw anything at Donald Trump and he will still have a very solid base, regardless of what he says. He even admitted it. For Mike Pence, the same cannot be said. Mike Pence is not enthusiastic. He doesn't come across as a genuine guy. Despite a lot of people not liking Donald Trump, his connection with the voters is very real. A lot of those voters were able to appeal, were appealed to by a billionaire better than Hillary Clinton. And Hillary Clinton had a pretty much middle-class story growing up. Donald Trump did not. And, for whatever reason, Donald Trump's enthusiasm was able to put him over the top in a lot of these states, which is not a quality that I see in Mike Pence. I do think that the Rust Belt will eventually narrow up. I think these are areas that are going to go for the Republican Party in the near future. However, in this election, I still think that Kamala Harris will hold it off. In New Hampshire, I think the same thing. New Hampshire pretty much has a very stagnant growth in terms of black population. The entire country is getting more and more, not just black population, minority population. The entire country is growing in terms of its minority population. By 2050, it's expected that white people will be the minority in this country for the first time in American history. And a lot of these states are starting to peak over 50% in terms of minority representation. Texas, New Mexico, Arizona are all on track to do so. But New Hampshire, Vermont, and Maine are states that pretty much don't. They haven't really been expected to change too much. So New Hampshire, I think, will always stay a swing state. A lot of those whiter voters that are on edge about voting for Democrats versus Republicans, it'll probably stay as a swing state. For Maine's 2nd District, I still don't see it coming back for the Democratic Party. Even though Obama carried it, it likely is pushed a little too far to the right by Donald Trump's effect, I still think he would be able to carry Mike Pence in this sense, would be able to carry Maine's 2nd congressional district. Now, for Kamala Harris, she absolutely will help with black turnout. I could see her carrying North Carolina. I mean, Joe Biden is expected to carry it. I absolutely could see her carrying North Carolina as well. Florida, I think, would be an addition to the Harris campaign. Again, Mike Pence is nowhere near Donald Trump in terms of campaign tactics, and Donald Trump only narrowly won these states in 2016, might I add, and he's not expected to carry them in 2020. So if Kamala Harris is the incumbent vice president and Joe Biden decides not to run, that would pretty much clear the pathway for her to win the nomination and then end up, as the nominee and do very well on the general election standard, because Joe Biden is offering a sense of normalcy, a return to what was before Donald Trump. If he decides not to run, Kamala Harris is going to offer a new vision for America, and she would be the first woman president, and I think she would win in the race. I mean, talk about increased turnout. Kamala Harris likely will do numbers for Joe Biden. I understand that people may not change their votes because Kamala Harris was chosen as the VP choice, but in terms of turnout, those voters that maybe were on edge about voting for a white man may be more inclined to vote for a woman of color in the White House, someone who could be a direct advocate, someone who has directly experienced the issues that minority Americans experience in this country. She would be the first Asian American vice president, first Black American vice president, and woman vice president in American history. And based off this prediction, possibly the first woman president. But I do think that Iowa and Ohio, these are states that I still think that are going to retain with their Republican identity. Yes, Donald Trump pushed them to the right, but Mike Pence likely will retain most of those voters. Honestly, don't see too many Trump to Harris voters. A lot of these voters that voted for Donald Trump were not the same Republican voters that voted for Romney and McCain. Yes, that was a big chunk of it, obviously, but these people didn't really, grab around the Trump agenda, didn't really idolize Donald Trump the same way that we see a lot of his supporters do today. Nobody really reacted that way behind any other political candidate in the past. Donald Trump really changed the American electorate, and we're going to see people talk about Donald Trump for decades to come, can guarantee it. In the state of Nebraska, I think that Harris will carry the 2nd district. Again, centrists typically do better in these one-off districts, but Nebraska 2nd, I think, will go to Harris. I think Maine 2nd will go to Pence. But for Georgia, Arizona, and Texas, I could easily see Harris carrying Arizona. I don't think that's too far in terms of a stretch. For Texas, I still think that it'll hold for the Republicans in this matchup. I understand that it's a very big push away from talking about how it's going to be a Democratic state in the future. Honestly, in my videos, I think I'm misunderstood. Once it's no longer a safe Republican state, it's going to be very difficult for me to draw a map where the GOP wins. Even with Texas going to the GOP, they still lose this election. That's because the GOP's hold on these solid Republican states has pretty much dwindled. Now, I think that Harris likely wouldn't be the nominee to win Texas in the 2024 election. I definitely think that if the Democrats nominate someone who's Hispanic, Julian Castro, whoever it might be, could do better in winning the state of Texas. I definitely think it'll be super competitive, but when it comes down to it, I could see Mike Pence carrying it very narrowly. I mean, it's a tilt margin. It could go either way. But if I was to guess today, I would say Texas, still narrowly retained in the Republican column, but the Democrats are absolutely competitive on every level, the Senate level, House level, governor level. No statewide races would be immediately conceded to the GOP, as they have been in the past few years even. So Texas, super competitive, but Mike Pence I still think comes out on top. And talking about increased black turnout, I mean, we're seeing Georgia get more and more Democrat every election year that follows Donald Trump, including his initial election in 2016. And I could see how Kamala Harris could carry Georgia. But, I don't think it'll be by a large margin. I think it'll be very narrow, but she still carries it regardless, and it's a winner-take-all system. And it ends up with Mike Pence losing with 189 electoral votes and Kamala Harris with 349. This is honestly pretty probable. I mean, looking at the way that a lot of these states are moving, we could see the Rust Belt narrow up from where they're expected to be in 2020. But a lot of these southern states, when I say southern, I mean cutting off right around here. A lot of these Sun Belt states, I would say, are getting more Democrat and are increasing in terms of minority representation, which, like I said, in turn, increased Democratic Party's vote share, the Democratic Party's vote share. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. I promise I won't jump too far ahead in the 2024 election again, at least for a couple of weeks, but I decided to take a break from 2020 election videos, just for this video in particular because of the DNC ending last night. We may talk about that. Honestly, don't know for sure if I'm going to make a separate video about the DNC. You guys could watch it if you didn't want to. Whatever, there's highlights everywhere. But yeah, so thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.